Today marks the 100th day since Russian President Vladimir Putin's troops invaded the country, and heavy fighting continues there as President Zelensky estimates that 20% of Ukraine is now under Russian control.
How exactly has Ukraine been able to fight back Putin and his troops and succeeded so far in tactically avoiding being completely subdued by the Russian forces? The Ukrainian troops have shown outstanding bravery and have thwarted Putin's war plans on every front. From the outset, Russia's decision to invade Ukraine was hard to understand, as it seems at odds with what most experts saw as Russia's strategic interests. As the war has progressed, the widely predicted Russian victory has failed to emerge, as Ukrainian fighters have repeatedly fended off attacks from a vastly superior force. This bravery and resolve by the Ukrainians in the face of the Russian aggression has spawned a global reaction by world leaders in a rather striking and unprecedented fashion. Russia's war in Ukraine has proven itself to be one of the most consequential political events of our time, and one of the most confusing. The war so far has revealed Putin's maximalist war aims of actualizing a regime change in Ukraine, something that Putin and the elites in the Kremlin have tagged as the denazification of Ukraine, as well as the elimination of Ukraine's status as a sovereign state outside of Russian control. But how exactly has the Ukrainian forces been able to achieve this shocking and impressive feat? As it is our practice on this channel, we've dug through hundreds of Ukrainian warfare strategies since the late 19th century and have uncovered just how Ukraine has been able to achieve this compelling and impressive feat and combated the ongoing Russian aggression in the most effective way possible, despite Russia's superior military power. But before we get into the intriguing details of today's video, do make sure to give this video a like, hit the subscribe button and smash that notification bell to receive notifications of when we post more mind-blowing videos about one of the most influential and feared men in the world right now. You can leave us a comment as well, as we'd love to read your opinions on how the Ukrainian army has so far been able to disrupt Putin's war plans on their nation's territory. You definitely want to watch this video till the very end, so keep up! The situation in Ukraine has clearly evolved into a full-blown humanitarian crisis, and having far-reaching consequences in a variety of areas. The challenges that will arise from the war will not be limited to Ukraine alone, but they will continue to spread very quickly across the globe. The Russian invasion into Ukraine marked a tipping point for world security, the international economy, and our global energy architecture, and it's absolutely not possible to narrow down a war of this scale to one region while we live in a globalized world. Russia's military vastly outstrips Ukraine's, and Russia spends over 10 times as much on defense annually as Ukraine. The Russian military also has a little under 3 times as much artillery as Ukraine, and roughly 10 times as many fixed-wing aircraft. As a result, the general pre-invasion view was that Russia would easily win a conventional war and crush whatever resistance the Ukrainians might put up with relative ease. In fact, war experts predicted that Kyiv, the capital, could fall within 72 hours of Russian invasion. The initial Russian plan reportedly operated under the assumption that a swift march on Kyiv would meet only token resistance. But that's not how things have played out, and 3 months into the invasion, Ukrainians still hold Kyiv. Russia has, however, managed to make some gains, especially in the east and south, but the consensus view among military experts is that Ukraine's defenses have been strong and held on stoutly, to the point where they have likewise been able to launch counter-offensives. As the initial Russian invasion slowed, and following countless long-range missile strikes that caused significant damage to Ukrainian military assets, urban residential areas, communication and transportation infrastructure, and hospitals and residential complexes, Russia announced that it would reduce military activity near Kyiv and Chernihiv in late March. This was subsequently followed by the withdrawal of all troops from Ukraine's capital region by the 6th of April. The Ukrainian resistance in Kyiv has been solid and completely beyond what Putin had envisaged, hence the decision to abandon the capital city and cause havoc in some other parts of Ukraine where the Ukrainian forces for defensive operations were very minimal. In the aftermath of the withdrawal of Russian troops from Kyiv's surrounding areas, reports began to emerge from Ukrainian civilians describing apparent war crimes committed by Russian forces, including accounts of summary executions, torture and rape. On April the 18th, Russia launched a new major offensive in eastern Ukraine following its failed attempt to seize Kyiv. The port city of Mariupol in southeastern Ukraine has suffered serious aerial bombardment from Russian troops that has damaged over 90% of the city. Over 20,000 Ukrainian civilians have been reported dead thus far, with mass graves being dug for the victims just outside of the city. Acute shortages of food, water and heat have likewise continued to persist. The plan and hope for a quick victory in Kyiv fell apart within the first 48 hours of the war, when early operations like the airborne assault on the Hostomel airport ended in disaster and forced Russian generals to develop a new strategy on the fly. What they ultimately came up with was to conduct massive artillery bombardments and attempt to encircle and besiege Ukraine's major cities. This proved to be a tad more effective and even more brutal, but the capital city of Kyiv still remains under Ukrainian control. Taking control of Kyiv and toppling Ukraine's central government is the center point of Putin's plans, but this goal remains largely elusive, all thanks to the exemplary bravery and superior intelligence of the Ukrainian forces. A failed Russian attempt to storm Kyiv and other big cities took a heavy toll in personnel and equipment, boosted morale in Ukraine, and allowed it to rally broad international support. The myth about the invincibility of the Russian military as the second most powerful in the world has been shattered, to much surprise of the Ukrainians themselves and the world at large. Ukraine's tactical advantage has been to trade space for time. The Russian military's abysmal performance has been one of the major surprises of the Ukraine war. Rather than a near-peer competitor to the United States, this past month has revealed Russia to be a poorly trained and demoralized force, reliant on antiquated equipment. But the complications that Russia has encountered in Ukraine's urban cities of Mariupol, Kharkiv and Kyiv are not simply a function of Russian incompetence. They're rather a reflection of the difficulties any military would face in urban warfare. Ukrainian forces, rather than fight for every inch of Ukrainian land, chose to withdraw strategically and fight the Russians on preferred territory, and at the time of their choosing. The nature of the Ukrainian choice became clearer as the war progressed. So instead of getting into pitched large-scale battles with Russians on open terrain, where Russia's numerical advantages would prove decisive, the Ukrainians instead have chosen to engage in a series of smaller-scale clashes. Ukrainian forces have bogged down Russian units in towns and smaller cities, favoring street-to-street combat, which gives them an advantage as the defenders. They can use their superior knowledge of the city's geography to hide and conduct ambushes, and have successfully attacked isolated and exposed Russian units traveling on open roads. They have repeatedly raided poorly protected Russian supply lines as well. This approach by the Ukrainians has proven to be very effective so far, and they have successfully managed to stall the Russian invasion. The Russian military tacitly recognized this reality during a briefing in late March. But rather than openly admit this, Russia's top generals continue to implausibly claim they never intended to take Kyiv from the onset and were always focused on making territorial gains in Ukraine's east. The initial Russian campaign to invade and conquer Ukraine is culminating without achieving its objectives, and Russia is basically being defeated by Ukraine's gallant forces. Currently, Ukraine's forces are on the offensive and have succeeded in pushing the Russians further from Kyiv. Ukraine's military has likewise successfully retaken the suburb of Irpin and forced Russia to withdraw most of its troops from the area in a tacit admission of defeat. In the south, where Putin directed Russian troops to after the disappointing outcome of the attempt on Kyiv, Ukrainian forces are now contesting Russian control over Kherson. Throughout the fighting, Russian military casualties have also been horrifically high. Reports from the US Defense Department estimate that over 7,000 Russian soldiers were killed in the first 3 weeks of fighting alone, with this figure presently standing at about 40,000 total losses, including injuries, captures and desertions. 7 Russian generals have also been killed in the fighting, and material losses, ranging from armor to aircraft, have been enormous. Russia, in its report, put its death toll at slightly more than 1,300 soldiers, a report that is widely considered to be a significant undercount. Russia's invasion, according to warfare experts, has gone awry for 2 major reasons. The first being that its military wasn't ready to fight a war like this, and secondly, Ukrainians have put up a much stronger defense than anyone expected. Russia's problems in the war have been largely attributed to Putin, whose invasion plan was highly unrealistic. But even after the Russian high command adjusted its strategy, other flaws in Russia's army remained. One of the biggest and most noticeable issues with the Russian troops has been rickety logistics. Some of the most famous images of the war have been of Russian armored vehicles parked on Ukrainian roads, seemingly out of gas and unable to advance. The Russian forces also appear to be highly under-equipped and badly supplied, a clear indication of inadequate preparation for the war, as well as a great underestimation of Ukraine's military might. The same lack of preparation has plagued Russia's air force, and despite outnumbering the Ukrainian air force by roughly 10 times, the Russians have failed to establish air superiority. Ukraine's planes are still flying, and its air defenses mostly remain in place. But this does not all mean that a Russian victory is impossible. Any number of things, ranging from Russia's reinforcements to the fall of besieged Mariupol, could give the war effort new life and make Putin and his troops the eventual victors. Disclaimer: this is purely an informational video, and we're in no way promoting or approving Putin's recent action in any way.